All right, what's up, everybody? It's a Friday. I'm glad for that. Been a long week, but ready to hopefully end the week well here. We got a big NBA slate to walk through today, so we're going to jump into that here in just a second. Just a quick reminder that this is going to be on Twitter. You can watch it on my YouTube channel, also have the podcast up now. And if you're like me, content like this, that's sort of daily breakdown type stuff, I like to have that available where I can just listen to it as I'm doing other stuff, drive in at the gym, whatever. So my goal is going to be to have this up by about noon Eastern every day. There will be days where I don't hit that goal because of other work stuff, but that'll be the goal. And you can check it out. The links are in my Twitter profile for all the different places you can find the podcast. All right. So that said, let's go ahead and jump into these games and see what we've got today. First game up is the Boston Celtics against the Philadelphia 76ers. Philadelphia is -3.5, and the total is 210. The big news that if you follow the NBA, everybody knows about by now is that Joel Embiid is going for the record in terms of most consecutive 30-point games. So you have to imagine that he's going to go after that here, not only because he would want the record, but also Philadelphia needs him to score that much. They are not a great offensive team, and the games where they've done well, it's because Embiid has dominated. I did see somebody on Twitter today in response to something say that Al Horford is the Embiid stopper. So I guess we'll see if that's the case or not. But Embiid has been pretty unstoppable in general as of late, getting whatever he wants for the most part. In terms of injuries in this game, there's not a lot to discuss. Marcus Smart is a game time decision, so he may or may not be in there. And then Green and Milton are out for Philadelphia. Both of these teams play really slow. Philadelphia plays at a 95.1 pace at home, and Boston plays 95.9 on the road. So neither of these teams is going to be fast, and this is a game that's likely to just kind of get bogged down. And so a lot in terms, the total is low, it's 210. But a lot of even hitting that total, I think, is going to come down to shooting percentages because neither of these teams is likely to get a massive number of possessions, probably even slightly below their average just because they both don't play fast. And so them shooting well or not is going to be a big deal in this game. Boston has scored 100 or more in 10 of their last 11 away from home, which might not seem like a big deal, but they've been more 50-50 at home in terms of even getting to 100. So they are generally doing that on the road. Philadelphia had been scoring really well until their last game against Charlotte when I believe they had 99. But the problem when you dive into that deeper is just the teams that they've played putting up more points. They scored 111 against Houston, which is actually pretty bad. Houston's giving up 120 plus to almost everyone these days. They scored 119 against the Spurs, which is good, but the Spurs have been terrible on defense lately and are not a great defensive team to begin with. 116 against Orlando. That's actually really good because Orlando has not been giving up many points. They're holding teams 105 or less most of the time. So that's actually one of the two games in this stretch that I would say sticks out. They scored 133 against Houston. Again, that's a lot, but it's Houston. Scored 110 against Brooklyn, which sounds okay, but Brooklyn's been giving up 110 plus to everybody. So that's actually not a great number. They scored 114 against Toronto. That's the other one that I would say is pretty solid. And then 117 against Washington, which, again, Washington gives up a lot of points to pretty much everyone. So Philadelphia has been scoring well. I just think we need to take it with a grain of salt and not assume that now they're this juggernaut offensive team. I think as they face more defensive resistance, they're going to struggle to put up those big numbers at least. And I think Boston is a team that can offer a decent amount of defensive resistance. I also do wonder if in this game, Embiid's going to be trying to force it a little bit because of the record. And if he does, if that could mess up any flow that they do have to their offense. I don't know. I don't feel super strongly about that, but I do wonder about it. If you follow me, you saw that yesterday I put out a video with the top 10 trends from Christmas to now, so short-term trends. And I had over 150 of those that I put together yesterday. And so I am going to be looking at those trends over the next week or so here just to see if things stick out. And one of the things that stuck out in this matchup specifically is that Boston has tended to win in the first quarter and first half, but then lose in the second half, while Philadelphia is 7-1 straight up in the second half. And so one of the things that I think is worth paying attention to in this game, not that the bets pregame are a bad idea, but I think you could pay attention to what's going on at halftime. If it's a pretty close game and Boston's up a few points, I think that's a good spot to bet Philadelphia at a decreased number from that 3.5, maybe get them even on the money line, possibly at plus money. So that's something to watch. Because in addition to what I just shared, the larger trends, Boston's 0-6 in their last 6 against Philadelphia, against the spread, and 1-5 in their last 6 at Philadelphia. So Philadelphia has dominated them more recently against the spread. I'm not saying they've dominated them overall. The other thing here is that the under is 7-3 in the last 10 at Philadelphia and 8-3 in the last 11 between these two teams. So that goes back to some of what I was saying earlier, where I think Philadelphia maybe has been overachieving in terms of their scoring a little bit. And Boston is not an offensive juggernaut. Both of these teams play slow. That total is low at 210. I would lean under that if I was going to take something. I probably won't take something pregame on this with the total, but that is where I would lean. The one other thing just to throw in terms of scoring in this game is when you look at Boston's scoring, if they score 110 plus, their combined field goal and 3-point percentage is over 80 every time. I mean, not every time for the whole season. I look back like a month plus, but in that time period, it's been over 80. Now, sometimes they have over 80 in that combination of field goal and 3-point percentage and still score under 109, but they have to hit 80 basically. Philadelphia allows 78% combined between field goal and 3-point percentage at home. So just another thing to toss in that bucket of Boston maybe struggling to score a little bit here. Same for Philadelphia, leaning toward that under in the game overall. And then the other thing for me is just watching potentially a good bet on Philadelphia at the half. Next game up is the Magic and the Hornets. Charlotte is minus 10.5, and the total here is 224.5, 223.5 in some places. Big news in terms of personnel here. Well, pretty big news. I mean, Oubre is still out for Charlotte, but the big news is that Jalen Suggs is coming back. And this goes way back to the beginning of these videos. But when we started breaking these down, one of the things that I saw was that Suggs is not really great for Orlando, especially on the offensive side. He tends to chuck it, and he doesn't chuck it well. So who knows? Maybe he's going to come back and be better. But I think it's actually a negative for Orlando that Suggs is coming back. With Suggs, Orlando has scored 99 points a game this year and given up 104 and they've scored 104.5 without him. So they're 5.5 points less with him than without him. They are a little bit better on defense, about 2.5 points better on defense. So he doesn't hurt them on the defensive end of the floor, but on the offensive end, Orlando already struggles to score, and they're just going to struggle more. In their last 6 away from home, they've scored 106, 92, 98, 100, 83, and 104. So 106 has been the ceiling, and most games haven't hit that. Half of them have been under 100. On the other side of this, one of the things that I brought up in that trends video that you don't really expect is that Charlotte's actually been a really good defensive team lately. Their season average defensive rating is 113.5, but they've been under that in 8 of their last 10. Washington and Phoenix were the 2 where they allowed above that. They've not been giving up a ton of points, especially in the very near term. Their last 3, they gave up 98, 99, and 106. Before that, 111, then they had a couple higher ones, but then 108 and 99. So they have a longer stretch here where they're actually playing really good defense, and their totals still get steamed up, I think, because it's Charlotte. I mean, the total in this game is 223.5, and you have an Orlando team that you can't expect to score more than 105. And I'd say 105 is on the high end with how Charlotte's playing. So that means Charlotte would have to score in that 220 range, 218 to 220, which they haven't been doing on a consistent basis. In their last 7 games, they have 2 that have been 3 over 118. So not 50%. So they can do it, but it just hasn't been consistent. And I think these totals are getting steamed up on Charlotte just because they have this reputation of being a high-flying offensive team. Orlando's been kind of up and down on defense. Their season average is 112.7 defensive rating. They've been under that in 7 of 12, but they've been under it in 6 out of 7 away. So they've played pretty good defense on the road. In terms of trends on this game, there's good against the spread trends for Charlotte. And Charlotte is 7-3 against the spread in their last 10 when the games have been played in Charlotte. Also, the over is 7-3 in the last 10. So that goes a little bit against what I was sharing in terms of the points being scored here. But looking at this game overall, the data is really strong to me. I think that this is a push that Charlotte's making, and maybe there will be some regression toward them giving up more points over time. But right now they're playing well on defense against a team that's bad on offense and is getting a player back in Suggs who makes them even worse on offense. So I will be surprised if Orlando scores more than 100 or 101 today. And for that reason, I'm interested in the under on Orlando's team total, which I think was 105.5. I think that's a good number. I'm interested in the under on the game as a whole. And then I am interested in Charlotte against the spread. But man, I would love to watch this live and just hope it comes down a couple points. 10.5 is just a lot, though I actually do think Charlotte is in a spot to cover that today as long as they play decent. Next game up, we have the Raptors and the Pistons. Toronto is -8, and the total is 214.5. Trent and Barnes are both game time decisions. It looks like maybe they're trending toward playing, but again, it's hard to tell for sure. So this one, I looked at something a little bit different that was kind of interesting to me. I was looking at Toronto's scoring, and my impression is that they're this really high-scoring team lately, and that's only kind of true. So if you look at their last 9 games, their scoring has been a bell curve. And if I had more technical acumen, I would have figured out how to create this and be able to share it on the screen. But I have it in my notebook drawn out with a pen so I can share it that way. So a bell curve, probably it starts low, goes higher, comes back down on the other side. If you look at their last 9 games, on either end, they scored 99 and 95. Right in the middle in game number 5, they scored 129. And then it drops off on either side of that. It went 129 and then working backwards, 120, 116, 109, and then 99. Working forward from the other side, there were 2 that were flipped here, but it generally holds true. 129, 117, 122, 105, 95. So they did have this offensive burst, but it seems like they started low, had a burst, and are coming back to earth a little bit. However, one of the things that I looked at in terms of a correlation here is the pace that they played with in these games. And interestingly enough, there's one outlier. In their most, in their most recent game, they had a pace of 107.15 and they only scored 99 points. So that's an outlier. But if you correlate the rest of their scoring, it goes right along with pace. The higher the pace, the more points are scored. When they scored 129, the pace was 102.92. And that was the highest of the last 9 games, other than the one I just shared that's an outlier. So I think we have a correlation here that's at least an interesting input for us to look at, that when the pace is higher, Toronto scores more points. I know that seems intuitive, but the funny thing is when you look at these game logs, it's just not always the case. Sometimes teams score about the same regardless of pace. So Detroit is a team that's played with more pace lately. They've been over 100 in 6 out of their last 10. And only under 97 in 1 of their last 10, which is definitely pace up for them. And that's been part of this little burst that Detroit's had in terms of playing a little bit better over the last 10 games. Detroit's had a defensive rating of 115 or worse in 4 out of their last 5. And they're third worst defending the 3 at 36.8% allowed. That's a big deal because a lot of what drives Toronto's scoring is Fred VanVleet in particular shooting threes, along with Anunoby and a couple others. So when they hit their season average, the Raptors, of 34.1% from 3 or better, they've scored 105, which isn't great, but then 117, 129, 120, 119, 129, 124. So you're seeing, like, both in terms of pace and 3-point shooting, when those 2 things are in the right spot, that's when Toronto tends to score a lot of points. So you'll see you're obviously going to see the direction I'm going here for this game. In terms of trends, not much on the spread, not much team specific on the over-under. Toronto is 0-4 in their last 4 against Detroit. And so I think that's interesting that they've struggled so much in this specific matchup. But the over is 4-0 in the last four here, which I think it fits with the analysis that I'm seeing on the data side for this game. Looking at those short-term trends that I had, like I talked about, what I came away with there is that an interesting bet could be Toronto in the first quarter. Toronto scored 30 or more 67% of the time in the first quarter, and Detroit has averaged losing the first quarter by 6.89 points since Christmas. So one bet to look at is Toronto in the first quarter, but then the other thing that I'm definitely looking at here is that I haven't bet it because I'm going back and forth between betting the over for the game or Toronto's team total over. Toronto's team total is 111.5, but when you look at those factors of pace and 3-point shooting, I think that's a number that they absolutely should hit today. However, Detroit overall has been scoring better and playing with a little more pace. And so I don't mind looking at them contributing to this total hitting the over today. But that's a spot that I like overall. Next game up, we have the Suns and the Pacers. Phoenix is -5 and the total is 220.5. When I first looked at this game, I thought for sure I would be betting the Suns -5, and I am a little less certain of that now. Let's talk about why. So Indiana has scored 106 or more at home in 9 straight games and 10 out of 11 before they only scored 100 against Boston in their last game. So this is where we get some recency bias coming in potentially. You see them only score 100 points, and honestly, it didn't even look like they were going to get to 80 for a while. They were just atrocious in the first half of that game against Boston, and you see that and you think, man, Indiana's just in a slump. They're terrible right now. And that could be true. But I think it's important to look back at that larger sample and say they average 111.5 points a game at home, and they scored over 106 in 9 straight and 10 out of 11 before this most recent game. So I think it's jumping the gun to say that Indiana's not going to be able to put up any points here. On the other side, Phoenix has been under their offensive rating for the season in 3 straight, but they were over it in 7 straight before that. So to the best that I could tell, what's going on there is they've gotten everyone back and they're trying to figure out what their rotations are now. They're getting used to playing with each other again. Ayton, I know, had decent numbers in the time that he played, but when I was just watching their last game, he looked really clumsy and kind of out of sync. So I think he and maybe others are still trying to just get back into the groove of things. So I don't expect Phoenix to continue to be terrible on offense for the long term. The question is, are they going to turn it on today, though? When they've been that bad, we're going to see this with Golden State a little bit later, too. When they've been bad 3 straight games, I get a little hesitant about being confident that they're going to be really good and up to their season average on offense again in this next game. I am confident that they will move that direction over time, but I'm not sure I want to bet on it happening here because I don't know if it will. Looking at trends in this game, there are actually really good trends for Indiana against the spread and just 50-50 for Phoenix. Indiana is 7-2 against the spread in the last 9 versus Phoenix. However, Phoenix is 7-3 against the spread in the last 10 that are played in Indiana. Also, the over here is 4-1 in the last 5 at Indiana. In terms of the short-term trends for me that I'd look at here, Indiana is 2-6-1 in the first quarter. And so that's a possible bet you can look at, although the trends aren't that strong for Phoenix in the first quarter. Indiana has scored 106 or more in 4 out of 5 at home and allowed 113 or more in 4 out of 5 at home. So they are scoring decent, but they're also giving up quite a few points. And with that over trend, I think I would lean a little bit to the over here, though 220.5 is a little higher than I'd want to see it. I think if I was going to bet it, I'd want it more around 216.5. And so I'd probably stay off of that. But given Phoenix's struggles on offense recently, sorry about that. Given their struggles on offense recently, I'm a little bit hesitant to actually bet Phoenix here. All right, next game up is Golden State and Chicago. And sorry, I gotta check something real quick here. My bad, y'all. This is what happens when you got to check messages while you're doing this. So, all right, I'm gonna have to edit this. Hey guys, I'm gonna have to just jump back on later and do the other half, and then I'll put it together for the podcast. Sorry to do that, but we'll jump on here in just a little bit and